Greetings, greetings. So today I'm going to just share an observation of how to leave a cult. I do understand that from experience that folks that are in a cult are often isolated, and I'm making a distinction between um, cults where you can go and come as you please, as in a church or a synagogue out in the city, and cults where folks are isolated in terms of their location. It can be within the United States or their country. Quite often, folks are isolated. So I'm going to just share from my personal observation and experience what it takes to leave a cult. And there's some things um, that will have to be reckoned with for whoever that person is. So, um, first of all, it's stop asking for permission. That's something, and again, many of these things are things that we've been programmed with and are not to be underestimated. Quite often, we have so much information, we think ourselves into a hole, and we're so overthinking and second guessing ourselves, we become paralyzed in common sense. And cult leaders and manipulators know this. But it will be necessary to not ask people for permission. Permission what to think, what's right and wrong, what you would like to eat, if you would like to have children, if you don't want to have children, what you want to do, uh, if you want to have sex, if you don't want to have sex, whatever your choices are, it will be necessary for you or for the individual to become very comfortable with not asking for permission. Now, this is not limited to cults. These very basic principles can be applied to if you're in a narcissistic, abusive relationship. Um, yeah, if you are in a religion, if you grew up in a religion, or if you're in a church, again, the distinction in the average synagogue, church, ashram, most of the pressure is going to come from your peers. But there's pressure, but you have to allow the pressure, the peer pressure, and allowing somebody to question you. So numerous times I have stated and shared that me sharing, I'm not an entertainment channel. I'm just providing this as a sharing. Hopefully, it will benefit a young person or a single woman or a mother who may be out of fear, which can be understandable, looking for safety, looking for love, looking for these clean, upstanding men. Those things in and of themselves aren't wrong. But however, it's likely that many people get got. So, not asking for permission, that would allow you to leave a cult. So, you're not asking for permission. You're not asking for permission or a censorship of your thoughts, at least not anymore. Initially, we may see some that we admire their perceived accomplishments, or maybe their accomplishments, but you don't know these people. So, what do? And many people do. You go to them and you ask for guidance, you ask for their wisdom, you ask for help. Most people just don't bank on being manipulated by the person they're going to asking for help. And it's not to make people wrong. It makes sense that a young person or even somebody that's mature is going to go to somebody or seek someone that's older, more experienced for advice. However, the reality of the matter is there are numerous predators that prey on people that are looking for guidance and assistance. So the ultimate decider is you. No matter how much somebody has more degrees than you, or more experience, or more children, it can't trump your sense of right and wrong and your sense of something feeling off. So first is not asking for permission. Another thing is folks will have to accept you are alone, right? This is alone. If you're in a cult and you have family members, you may have to leave family members, so-called friends, or people that you have established relationships with. So people can think, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave this relationship. I'll never find anyone else, and those are thoughts in your playing in one's own mind. You're welcome. That could keep someone within a cult or within a very unhealthy relationship. and people are afraid to be alone. So we dread, I know, especially as women, we dread being alone. We dread these visions of I'll never have children or I'll never find love. It's actually one of the 6 basic fears of human beings. And these are things that you can look up. Again, it's not a religion. These are just observations about human behavior. And these are good things to have discussions, not to spend too much time being overly analytical, again, till we paralyze ourselves with information, which seems to be the case right now. But yes, you are alone. And you may likely be alone with your food choices, with your choices to do things that are out of the ordinary from what you experience with your family. You may want to explore different types of food, living in a different environment. Usually, many people are looking for a community, and now the trending word is a tribe. However, comprehend or understand that you are alone. And basically, the moment something feels off to you, you will be alone and 110% responsible for your choices, and not to look for cheerleaders. One of the ways that I've observed is so easy for us to be played is we're pretty much thrown off with ego stroking. The moment someone gives us compliments, and this is maybe true for many of us that grew up, male and female, without acknowledgement, may have grown up with parents that were maybe not necessarily wrong, but so busy in survival mode or providing that they didn't spend a certain amount of time with us, or acknowledgement, or come to different events. I mean, it could be a myriad of things. But if we didn't feel a sense of acknowledgement, and acknowledgement ideally should come from your parents, which is why, to backtrack, is something I've shared in other videos. Be very wary and careful of people that don't take care of their children, and make a conscious choice for whatever their reasons or justifications. I'm not even going to make it right or wrong, more so than it's a pattern. So I'm going to put right and wrong, because that can even be a distraction from looking at the facts. If someone is making a conscious choice not to take care of the children that they have on this planet that are under 18 and 21, young people still need guidance, but it's telling you a lot. It's telling you a lot about that person. But in any event, you are alone in your choices, and it's beneficial to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, that people are not going to like you. They will call you names. Um, you will be excommunicated. You may be cut off from family members that choose to stay within a cult, and it's very painful. But if you can accept the pain that goes with it, something doesn't feel right, or this doesn't feel right for me, and other folks may choose to stay in the cult while you choose to walk away, because as much as logical as may seem, or as much as you try to rationalize in your brain the reasons for staying, something does not feel right. So you got to be okay with being alone, and the fear of, just sit with it. You may not get married, you may not have children. These are not horrible things, and it's not likely that that may not even necessarily be the case. But if you can accept these things, most likely they release their hold and their power over you, when you can face basically your fears. Quite often, much are in our own heads, and due to all the constant messages that are pumped at us from media programming. So stop asking for permission. You are alone, and accept it, and then you'll be freed up when you realize that. And also, more importantly, you'll be responsible when you realize you are responsible. You are alone, and you're responsible for yourself. And to put your life in someone else's hands, where they're not clear agreements, mutual agreements, a track record, and so on, is very dangerous. And time and has shown that it usually doesn't turn out well. Also, be necessary in order to walk out of a cult, to not worry if folks don't like you because of your decision. Folks that, and the interesting thing, folks that you thought you were forming relationships with, who you strove and at some point thought of each other's family, you may have been treating them as if they were family. Quite often, cult members, you're giving them more credence and putting more time and effort into your adult relationships than you are currently with blood relatives, folks that you grew up with, maybe siblings and blood relatives that you grew up with. So as we get older, you create new relationships. But for these people that now that you've put new investment of time and energy and care, and you have made a conscious choice to call them family. It's like, again, you may be thinking, feel a guilt or feel a way about, wow, I took all this time and energy to create a new family, and now I have to walk away. So grown folks' wisdom, based on life experience, you have to be willing to walk away from quote unquote new family that you may have created because it doesn't feel right. Something is off. As much stuff that looks good, there's something that's off, that is bothering you, that your insides won't rest with, and to really trust that and know that these people that you were calling family, they're not going to like you. They're not going to like you. Also, understand a practical sense, depending on how long you've been in the cult, you're exposed. You're exposed to things, and you've seen things that people outside of the cult haven't seen. So, folks that are in are not going to feel comfortable and be very uncomfortable with things being shared with outsiders that because you've lived in a cult, which is why cult leaders are always going to do everything to convince you to stay, especially if you invested a certain amount of time, energy, and resources. One of the basic reasons may not be so much because they like you, but because you've seen a lot that other people can't see or discern. So there's a concern for you. The worst thing of a cult leader or a narcissist is to be exposed, because the average person is too busy in survival mode or with their own lives to see the different nuances of what's going on inside of a cult. So the cult leader or the narcissist does not want to be exposed, or for someone to make sense of all the things that don't add up and don't make sense. So you're not going to be liked, and the manipulator or controller will so-called pit other people against you and make you seem like you're the demon, or you just couldn't handle, as Joseph Robinson, the cult leader, would say, of the so-called self-proclaimed Earth Soul and Messiah. You couldn't handle the process of detoxing and purging. Just all of this rhetoric and language. You couldn't handle being a divine sacred few of the few, when in reality there were just so many off things that did not add up. So you have to be willing to not be liked and really sit with that. People you thought you were forming relationships with, they're not going to like you when you leave, and it's okay. Because sitting there and wanting so badly to be liked can get you hurt, emotionally abused, and also you have to sit every day with knowing that something is off. And if you sit and sit, you'll most likely you drive yourself crazy, sitting in there, and you have to pretend. And that's like developing, I don't know if I want to say it's developing a muscle, but you're developing a thought pattern. If you every day you have to convince yourself to overlook the things that are off, it has a definite effect on you. You have to be willing to be ridiculed by cult members. Not only will you be ridiculed by cult members or by someone in a narcissistic relationship that wants absolute control of you, you'll also be ridiculed by people who, by, let's say, for example, family members or people that will say, well, why did you even try to do something different anyway? Right. So, for example, and which could be it's a quite a position to be in. You have the cult members don't like you, and then let's say in the instance of many people wanting to escape or do the exodus to the tropics. Why did you even try to leave the city anyway? Bring your butt back home. To make you feel wrong for even trying to step out of the box of what is familiar. And it's interesting, I would say, not limited to, but definitely I could say as a Black person, with trying to live outside of the city. Why did you even try to homeschool? Why would you even venture on not giving your children immunization? So folks may feel pressure from both sides, but you really have to trust in yourself and do due diligence, of your research, but just be willing not to be liked and by any of the sides. At some point, again, you have to rely more on you than you rely on um, someone's religious uh, idea or concept of God, whatever that is, because that changes like the wind. That the context of somebody's words, the family members you grew up with, and the cult leaders. So again, this is why I say it's important to accept and be at peace with the fact that you're on your own. And interesting, many people will try to have you come into their camp or their cult, like their cult is better. But wisdom and life experience would be sit and be with yourself and be okay with being alone and taking your time and working with what you've got. So you're not drawn again into someone else's agenda, and take a healthy time to process how you got sucked in and what you will do differently. And it's really important to step back, because you can't change something if you can't see the pattern, if you can't step back. And that's challenging to do, especially as you're on your own, right? When you go to other people for feedback, even if it's so-called true, quite often you don't see what their agenda is. And basically, if you go to 100 people to ask 100 people for advice, 100 people are going to give you 100 different pieces of advice, but from their perspective and their life experience. And all 100 of them could have little remnants of truth, but it may not be a fit for you. So it's beneficial to be comfortable with your charting your own path. Um, in order to walk away from a cult, it will likely be necessary that you'll walk away from a lot of what you've invested, right? This is no different than people that are married or have invested time and energy in a home, a car, children. Many people have chosen to stay in certain situations because they put so much time and energy in. And I can't make somebody wrong for doing that. Quite often, what we leave out of the equation is our own emotional health. Yeah, we leave out our own emotional health, and we just think of the car and the money and the convenience. But if you don't have your emotional and mental health, and you're constantly in a debilitating, stressful situation every day that's playing on your mind, that is going to affect your ability to be productive. And it will definitely, that kind of stress. You could be eating all the fresh, raw fruits and vegetables in the world. But psychological and mental stress actually has a chemical and a physiological effect inside of your body. Working for years in the fitness industry, I remember studying um, uh, the arteries being clogged and atherosclerosis. Most of us only think of cigarettes or flesh foods causing the arteries become blocked. But I remember I was actually amazed to see, diagrams of being under the body being under psychological emotional stress, how the body can secrete substances that will actually clog up the arteries as a response to stress. So it's very important. It's not just the fruits and vegetables, a whole picture. So it's really necessary that we acknowledge, again, coming back to you will be alone, and not to discount the stress that we are under when we are in these situations where you're constantly made to second guess yourself, censor your whole thought process. That's a tremendous amount of stress. And even though you can't see it physically, it is definitely internalized. That stress, those thoughts have to go somewhere, and it's being processed in your body. Even though people want to talk of chakras and things that are outside the body and all these intangibles, all of that stress is processed inside of your body physically in your brain. It can create new neural pathways. You form habits of thinking. You form habits of not speaking up for yourself. And you internalize all the chemicals that are being secreted during stress, you know no different than folks that are constantly under stress with high paying or high profile positions, that when they don't sleep or they're in stress relationships, they secrete a whole lot of cortisol. So you could be eating raw foods and have a big gut based on stress, which will also affect your sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So being willing to walk away from the time invested in relationships. Also, one of the things, a real basic thing, you gotta be willing to leave the clothes behind and the outfits behind. Folks leave stuff behind in Babylon. We have all our favorite clothes and things that we acquire, but quite often, it'll be necessary to leave some physical things behind for you to get out of a cult, because a lot of times you can't carry all that stuff with you, particularly if you're isolated and if you're in another country. You don't know where you're going to next, and you have to travel light. So that's definitely incentive in a time where minimalism is trending, to constantly reassess and let go of things that are not needed. Also, because it will allow you to process very clearly what is really important. What is the priority? Is it all the African garb you have, and these collector items of which you've invested, and all the equipment and stuff you donated to the cult and gave, in your expensive equipment? Or you going to get out and value your peace of mind and your integrity, and knowing that that it just doesn't feel right? Will you value you more than the things and the relationships with other people? Something to consider in order to be able to walk out of a cult is to be willing to face the challenging work by yourself, and to walk a path by yourself. Now, especially as a woman, I would definitely say, and especially as a Black woman traveling in the world, there's quite a climate in the United States, but definitely in the world, if you're traveling on your own, it will just require, rather than being freaked out by fear mongering and all the news, it will require you to be more strategic, to have more backup plans, as I've said before, to have frequent flyer miles, have people that you can call back in the States, a backup plan and a backup plan of the backup plan, so that you can feel comfortable and safe. Making sure that you have proper apps, on your phone, making sure that you are extremely safe. Well, many people now, these young folks haven't planned beforehand, so they're already in a situation. But if you can accept a lot of the work, let's say like one of the draws of community, we're going to be doing all of this work and growing food together. So yes, you may need to grow your own garden by yourself, and it'd be humbling, and it'd make you quite appreciative, because you realize how much work it is. But it's your work. If it's something that you want to do, you have to be willing to do it alone. And I feel very sure that these things, when you face them, will bleed over or carry over into other areas of your life. If you're willing to handle the responsibility for decisions that you've made on your own, whether it's taxes, children you've had, bills, school bills, decisions that you made younger when you were in ignorance. If you're willing to face these things on your own, you're in a much better position to have more discernment and to see someone else coming with an agenda. Interesting. A lot of these narcissists and cult members, one of the things that I've heard come out of their mouths is, um, a Black woman, she doesn't need a man because the government is her man. And like sometimes we bind to these things. They seem like they make so much sense, but that's one perspective, and you don't have to own somebody else's perspective. And that's key to walking out of a cult. It can sound so much like it makes sense. It can sound like 100% truth, but if that's not your truth, then don't own stuff that is not yours. So that's one perspective. That's not my perspective. And I had such healthy examples, my mother and my two godparents, that I had a sense of community service, of getting up and doing things for myself. My grandma Luz, she was simple. She didn't have a cult. She didn't have self-help books. She had simple principles. She saved the money. She could eat and feed everybody for $5. That simple wisdom is what allowed me to walk out of a cult. So a lot of this stuff, and I have to say, people keep saying all this stuff with knowledge, and it really makes me think that we're really, or observe that we're so in a state from not having people and parents that are present, that basic stuff is being presented like it's this deep knowledge. Okay, you can say it's deep, but it's also very practical, because I could hold this man and other people up to my grandmother, who wasn't a woman of a whole lot of words. She was living, breathing. I did not have to read a book to experience how giving she was, how present she was. She was simple. She's rocking the old cornrows, even when they turned white. She was simple, pleasant, present. She wasn't a victim. She didn't hate men. She was very, very simple and had a great attitude. So whether she was in the Caribbean or in the States, she didn't have a victim mentality. She didn't play into, and I'm sure at the time she was in her maybe mid 90s when she transitioned. I never heard her complain about the man in her life, my father and my auntie's father. I never heard her complain. She never gave me any bad memory deposits. I used to wonder she didn't seem angry. Now, I don't know what she went through when she was younger, but she didn't give me negative deposits. So this woman in her simplicity, me being around her, I had her as a model. Now, maybe everyone doesn't have that, but I do invite folks to think of who there's some got to be someone in your life, even if you came across them on the internet, somebody in your life that made a positive deposit in you, or it gave you a sense of self. That could have been a teacher or somebody that reflected your gifts or something to you. We're so busy looking across at somebody else's father or what we think other people have that you don't have, that we are not looking at the strengths of what we have. For example, I can think of someone very close to me that never knew their father, and these things I can't tell that person what their experience is. But there's some people that can make peace. Like, it doesn't make me a bad person. That was on that person that was irresponsible. If this was an irresponsible male that didn't decide to show up for his daughter or the person he impregnated, that's on him. But it takes a mature person or some kind of makeup of a person. Some people could be okay with that. And for many people, they're traumatized or there's a hole that's there. So it will really require us also, in terms of walking out of a cult, to be okay with whatever your situation was that you are dealt in life. If your mother and father were present, if they were not, because you will keep looking for something. And one of the biggest lures of these cult leaders is to be the father. Even in the church religions, I'm the father. I'm gonna be your boyfriend. I remember coming up thinking, Jesus is my boyfriend, and people even have pictures. It's a common sense that's missing. You know, we portal here through a man and a woman, through them coming together and come through the womb of a woman. So fathers and mothers are both important. But at some point when you reach a certain age, whatever you got or you didn't get, your life is your responsibility. So again, in that sense of being alone, our parents are human beings with their own issues before we ever came along. And some people just don't have these conversations with adults. And so again, this is the lure of these cult leaders that manipulate young adults, young men, women that want to be mothers, and so on. So you have to be willing to accept you're going to be ridiculed by relatives because you even tried to break out of the box, and also the cult members because you even tried to leave. Another thing to explore and being able to walk out of a cult is to accept the fact that you were conned, because for a while you'll be able to think like, there's no way I can wrap my mind around this. Look at this, the image of this is a mother with children. There's no way in the world this person who I put on a pedestal, who is so nice, who is so beautiful. Look at their tone of voice. They speak like this and they call me sister. There's no way that they would con me. No way. Look, this person, they chant all day. They're celibate. There's no way they will be able to participate in something like that. Look at their age. Look what they've been through. You will have to accept that people who you put on pedestals, and they can be in their 70s, they could be in their 80s, they could be black as night, they can be mocha, they can be white, they can be presidents, they can be politicians, they can be family members. That human beings are capable of all kinds. They're capable of conning you. People, this is a big one. People have the capacity, human beings, to lie in your face with a straight face. People have the capacity to lie, and I would even say deception is worse than a lie. A lie straight up untruth. But someone that's telling you, yeah, yeah, the truth, but is manipulating and twisting the context of the truth, I would say is much more dangerous. So the con artist or the narcissist or the manipulator has all kinds of rationalizations and justifications for conning you, and actually believe that they're doing you a favor because your wretched state was so much worse. You were so overweight. You had so much acne. You had so much problems, and they only benefited you when you went to their cult. So they made your life that much better. So a con artist, a narcissist, a manipulator can be deceptive and lie in your face with a straight face. And the people that have been trained and broken and indoctrinated will do the same. No matter how much you've invested in relationships. Again, this is where we get into our emotions. And I like them and I love them, all these emotions. And you're so tripped out on emotions that you won't get up and walk. So, take a maybe again, go through the playlist on black cults, white cults, just to see the patterns. And take a look at the Jim Jones. Look at all the people lying on the ground. People of all colors. Many people's like, wow, finally something working in society. You have people of all colors coming together, and they went out to the tropics. There's so many patterns. And it was a lot they had not banked on, but going with the groupthink and being too afraid to speak up, people got themselves into a situation that they had not banked on and were ignorant of. I'm sure a lot of those folks had not anticipated on the cult leaders having all of those guns there and them not being able to leave. You know, I invite you to not be afraid, to be uncomfortable. And I would say this, I don't know if any of the parents of the cult members that are still in there, because it's a lot. It's a lot on a parent. It's a lot on a parent to reckon with their young person or their family member being in there. And again, this could even be religions. But I would say in my observation, in my simple observation, that we're not willing to see. We're not willing to be uncomfortable. We haven't been willing to see the truth. Again, who wants to think that their father or their mother, particularly if you think of the people that grow up in cults, again, on the playlist is a list of, and you can hear the experiences of the children of cult leaders, of their observation. They were grown up, born into a cult. They didn't know anything different. Just they had an inherent sense of right and wrong. Folks that left a cult, so they had to be extremely uncomfortable, and it was, as they expressed, it's very painful to leave the family relationships and they had tight family relationships to go out in the world. Some people that leave cults, young people in particular, go on to drugs because they're just not prepared for the lack of structure that the cult provided for them. And yeah, and then we can't underestimate the emotions that go with family relationships, because quite often that's why people dress up and work or whatever to pull somebody, right? So they can have rewarding relationships. But the responsibility to create those things will be on you. And again, I come back to one of the first things I said, accepting that you will be alone. You may not be alone, but that might be a reality. And that is such a loaded word. It brings up such pictures and fear for people. But there's a billion people on the planet if you want to interact with. The reality is, it is critical that we have healthy boundaries with each other. So it's really, let's see, the other thing in terms of, just in closing, in order to walk out of a cult, it's your responsibility to advocate for yourself. Now, it's one thing if it's a child or somebody that's of a certain age, they don't have the frame of reference, they don't have the life experience, and they may not have the semantic skills. So again, a pattern that's being observed with a lot of these cult leaders is that their rhetoric from the Bible or principles, they're being talked into circles. And even when they have questions, again, if people are peeping the patterns, when they have questions and they're questioning things, they're appeased, right? Some answers, they either given word puzzles, or they're bombarded with rhetoric that appeases them and kind of shuts down, makes their tap into their emotion, and makes their critical thinking go again into shutdown mode. So they can be calm and just appeased with relationships. You can be appeased with food. You can be appeased with sex. You can be appeased by, uh, as an example, aren't you feeling so much better now? This is technique. This is technique. This is one of the things I observed with Joseph Robinson, aka self-proclaimed high priest Kwatamani, Earth Solar Messiah. It's not to be underestimated how people can manipulate your mind, and many people underestimate and think it can't happen to them. It's happening all the time, every day. There are different degrees and levels of it. So it's your responsibility to advocate for yourself. It's no, it is it would also, let's say for a child, many children are told to hug people because their family members and the child may be uncomfortable, or they're made to feel rude. So these are ways that we program children to second guess themselves or not take the time to vet people. The average child is going to watch you when you come around before they engage with you. Usually, if they see their parent engage with you, that's usually their sign to open themselves up to you. So that's another pattern, something for us to look at, to become more comfortable with respect rather than being liked. Respect, people are upset. I find, well, it's males and females. Males are very upset if you don't want to let them touch you or hug you. They think that, oh, you think you're too good for someone, or, because I know definitely culturally are very touchy people. But if we look at overall, not having healthy boundaries, particularly when men folks and fathers can't be there all the time, it's not working for us, because we have generations now of women and potential mothers that have been so damaged from not having boundaries and not advocating for themselves. So we're not really in a position, women don't have the luxury to not advocate for themselves. So the more calm and comfortable we are with advocating that in ourselves, and knowing it doesn't take anything away from, which is not even a question, take anything away from your femininity to question and to vet people before you let them into your space. That's a good quality. That's a good quality, something we want to raise our children and young people with. So that will also require us to be uncomfortable with someone saying, I'd like to get to know you before I open myself. Now, children don't have that kind of language. They can't articulate that. And then also, when sometimes children may tell a family member, or sometimes they may not want to come and run to you. Sometimes we take it so personal that it winds up having the effect that we kind of program young people and children out of their natural vetting processes for people, right? And they take their cues from the adults. So it's our responsibility to advocate for ourselves, not waiting for the government and law enforcement. It's up to us to speak up for ourselves, because not speaking up for yourself, sometimes there may be a window of opportunity open if you're in a cult, to speak up. If you're out in public, if you're allowed to go out in public, quite often you could be, as in Joseph Robinson's case, they were constantly these things of there's no gas, and we're out and we're isolated, and there's no gas for you to travel, and we were isolated from an internet signal. So you think you're going into paradise, and it'll take you a long time before you realize that you're isolated. Your ability to communicate with others, whether that's social media, or you may not understand the way the internet works in other countries, which is very, very expensive in other countries. These are things that we take for granted in the States. It's actually a lot we take for granted in the States, and it's a different perspective. Again, there are trade-offs in whatever environment you go into. So the last thing is, in terms of being able to leave and walk out of a cult, you'll have to leave what is familiar. So as much as people think they're walking away and leaving what is familiar, in terms of, you leave what is familiar when you get married, you leave what's familiar when you think of traveling out into the world. You're going to leave what is familiar when you think you've developed a new family, or you made you contributed to this whole big garden, and sometimes people are not willing to walk away because they're placing a garden or what they've invested in over what they know is not right. So you'll have to be willing to walk away from what's familiar and deal with the what appears to be so fearful in order to get up and walk out of a cult. So I'm not going to drag this on too long. Hopefully this is helpful. If this is helpful, please share it with a young person or someone that's interested. Excuse me one second. Someone that's interested and traveling to the tropics, or that they're interested in joining one of these cults. That could be a cult even within the United States in one of these different camps, because many people may not have a frame of reference or something to compare something to. And then also these cult leaders, if one last distinction, if you don't have any of their peers, as much a good amount of their peers as possible to cross-reference, you are only depending on what the cult leader is telling you. And a cult leader, like somebody selling you crystal ball readings, at a fair, fortune teller, any kind of predator or pimp at the bus station, is already sniffing you out, understands human psychology, and they're going to tell you what it is they're assessing that you want to hear. They can tell if you feel like you have a male presence, if you the way you walk, your body language, if you're insecure, if you're traveling and you're by yourself. So it's going to be very, very necessary for you to be able to advocate for yourself, to speak up for yourself, because these predators and cons know already that you're in an environment that you're not familiar with. And I don't want to lose the last point because I have so much that I could share. Again, this is not for entertainment purposes. This is just so as these different things come up to me, because every day that I've been out of there, I could see more and more patterns and more things. They add up. When I was in it, was so many things. There were many things that I thought that were wonderful. Growing food, community, that was great. That's what I was striving towards in the city and when I came to the tropics. But there's not enough fruits and vegetables and so-called community and calling me brother and sister to make me overlook conning, scamming, manipulating young women when you're in your 70s, manipulating a young woman that just came out of high school, and other women who are in very vulnerable positions, emotionally and mentally and physically. Those are people that are ripe to be manipulated out of their savings, their money, people that are on their deathbed, that are sick, they'll give anything to live. So there are certain people like, mothers, single mothers, sick people that are on the outs with their family member, young men that don't have a good relationship with their fathers. There are so many people that are ripe to be calmed, and there's different levels to it. Again, whether you can get up and walk out of the perceived cult or if you're isolated. So in particular, I want to focus very specifically on, because it's trending, many people thinking they're escaping to the tropics. It doesn't even have to be that deep. You can really travel inexpensively and safe. It will just require you to do a lot of groundwork, footwork, and backup plans, and not be so over anxious that you put yourself into compromising positions. And it's so much other stuff, as my grandma and my grandpa say, one monkey don't stop no show. So it's not like I've stopped gardening and I'm running out to stick a chicken bone in my mouth, not knocking anybody that eats chicken if that's your choice. Because again, just because you eat fruits and vegetables, if I saw the hard way, you got lots, that doesn't mean you can't con anyone. So, some of those meat eating folks smoking cigarettes or whatever might be the very ones to bail you out. So there's so many different of levels of common sense and wisdom, and a lot of that wisdom is earned through life experience. So hopefully this is helpful for folks. So with that, I am going to end this video. And sometimes I'm challenged with knowing how to to end it. So if no one has any questions, I'm going to end this video. Yeah, I'm going to end this video, and hopefully, folks will stay safe. Will stay safe. Use their common sense. Not be so over anxious to get into to get into a family, or like time is running out or whatever. These are techniques that are used to really get people to make decisions out of a state of panic. And usually that can, again, lead people to make very rash decisions, particularly if they are if they're young people, again, or single mothers, or people think the time is running out to have a baby, all this. When in doubt, leave it out. All right. Take care.